you've been saying the importance of aging powerfully. Talk about why you want people to adopt this mentality, and then how does strength training fit into this equation?
As we age, you've heard these statistics that starting around age 30, we're losing 3 to 8% of our muscle a decade. It's up to 1% a year. It's actually, the muscle's not as scary as the fact that it's 2 to 4% strength and 6 to 8% power. So we're losing muscle size, but we're really losing quality. In strength can be tested best by just grip strength. If all of a sudden you can't open the jar like you used to, grip strength is like low grip strength is a huge indicator for a higher risk of all-cause mortality, of dying, right? So, but power, that's how fast you could do something, move something. Can you jump? Can you get out of the way? So, that's force times speed, right? Is the big thing that we lose. And why do we lose that? Because as we age, we lose fast twitch muscle fiber. Why is this a bigger, important problem for women than men? Because women tend to do, really focus in more on the slow twitch things because they thought that that would help them with getting long, lean muscles. I don't know what those are, by the way. I have no idea what a long, lean muscle is. I'll have a long, lean ballerina, muscle body. And so I'll do Pilates and yoga and, walking. Slow twitch, slow twitch, slow twitch. Well, we have slow twitch muscle fibers, fast twitch muscle fibers, and then we have hybrid muscle fibers that will become whatever you're asking them to become. So if you're doing more slow, those muscle fibers become slow twitch muscle fibers. As we're aging, we're losing muscle fibers. We're really losing predominantly fast twitch. So now we've taken the ones that could go either way and made them more slow, and we're losing our fast twitch and we're becoming slower. And so when you look at it, that's why I said, gosh, it's really about fast twitch. And that's our power, that's really our power plate. That's what we have to do. So that's where Aging Powerfully came from. And it kind of became a bigger thing because I realized, what does lifting heavy weights do for you? It teaches you that you can do hard things. Right? And, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. If you can go in the gym and lift those heavy weights, and then some dude's going to come over and say, that's good work. And I'm like, I just lifted more. I love the guys that come over and go, oh, that was really good they either say that was really good for a girl or that was really good for your age. Okay. So they, or if they really want to blow it out of the water, they say both. And I look at, because oftentimes I'm lifting more than them. And I'm thinking, dude, I guess I should say, well, that's really good for a guy. I'm like, stop it. Just say it's really good. If you want to compliment us, say that's really good. Anyway, I don't know why I got off on that rant, Doug, but because what I realized was, if the way we do one thing is the way we do everything, and we step into this and we start lifting heavy weights and we show that we can do that, and we show that we can show up powerfully, first at the gym, then in life, I feel like for so long, women have been playing small. We've tried to make ourselves smaller, shrink ourselves down, fit in those smaller sizes. And it's what if you put on 10 pounds of muscle and, you were stronger and maybe you were bigger. You won't be, because muscle's metabolic spanks. I've literally, you put on more muscle, you're going to have bigger metabolism. You're going to hold everything in tighter. It's the really only way you can spot reduce. But what if you showed up bigger? If you don't do it now, when the heck are you going to do it? When you're 90?
What are some of the mindset shifts you think are paramount for people to make if they're going to not just achieve the goals that we're talking about, but stick to it long term?
If you start to think, and I got this from Dr. Peter Attia, I love, love, love his concept of the centenarian decathlon. I think that, we have so many dreams in our 20s and 30s about our career. And I feel like as you get older, these things start to narrow. You start to think about the things you're not going to be able to do, what you don't have time for. And I think it's time to start dreaming again and go, what do I want to do in my 60s, 70s, 80s? For me, it's where do I want to travel? I'm going to love travel, right? So where do we want to go? And I know one thing, I love to travel. When we go to Europe, I love traveling on trains. I love trains, love it. And we're pretty independent. So Tim and I will go on trains. Now, we're also independent, but we also travel heavy. So if there's 70-pound luggage limitations, we have 70 pounds of luggage, right? And so literally we will carry, between the two of us, we each have two 70-pound big bags and then carry-ons that are like same thing. And he can't help me. He's got his own. So I want to make sure that at 70, I can go throw that 70-pound luggage onto the train, into the rack, right? I want to be able to do all these things. I remember we were in Greece, in Santorini, and these guys were running up and down the stairs with our luggage on their shoulders. And I'm like, geez. And, I want to be able to do all that kind of stuff. I don't want to be limited. I don't want to have worked my butt off all this time to be able to go do all these fun things, but now I can't do these fun things because, of whatever frailty, sarcopenic situation that I've gotten myself into. So I think that what the first place to go is, what would I love my life to look like for the next several decades? What are the things that I want to be able to do? Because if I want to be able to do those things in my 80s, I better be training for them in my 50s, right?
You talked about like spot reduction. I think I heard you say that a few minutes ago. And I think that, while I'm thinking of it, I think one of the things that people would like to spot reduce is their abs, is the belly fat, right? I think people are like, oh, I wish I could just do crunches and my belly fat would just disappear, which we know is not true. What have you found to be effective though in making sure that people can lose like the visceral fat, the fat that's like internal, like around the organs, that is like hidden and oftentimes causing like damage to people's health that people aren't aware of?
Yeah, and it's important. And what I love now is that you can get a DEXA scan and can actually determine the difference between body fat and then what's subcutaneous, what's just under the skin, the inches you can pinch, and what's visceral adipose tissue. At some point here, we'll also be able to look at intramuscular, which if you're a marathon runner is very different than if you are a couch potato. So for the most part, as people have fatty infiltrate in their muscle, and that's problematic too. So for most people, when we're really looking at belly fat, it's that visceral adipose tissue. It's that deep internal fat that's its own little hormone central, producing all of these inflammatory cytokines that can actually create more inflammation and create more insulin resistance. So higher insulin and higher cortisol and lower estrogen can lead to more visceral adipose tissue deposition, but then it becomes its own compounding problem because it sets up this own cascade of inflammation that then creates more insulin resistance that creates more of the problem. So it becomes like this really bad catch-22. However, what's cool is you can spot reduce. Now, obviously cortisol is an issue. And this is where I love high intensity interval training, because high intensity interval training actually teaches your sympathetic nervous system how to handle stress better. Push and recover, push and recover. And I know there's all this silliness out there in the exercise world about don't do whatever, because it raises cortisol. Well, if you felt that way, you couldn't do any exercise. Think what exercise does. It raises blood sugar, it raises blood pressure. It looks like the worst thing you could possibly do, but it's teaching your body how to handle hard things and recover. So HIIT training directly targets visceral adipose tissue. Like when I look at what are the things that are going to target visceral adipose tissue, HIIT training, resistance training, because it's helping you become more insulin sensitive quickly. So that's super helpful. And then alongside those things, you want to make sure you're super well hydrated, because even mild dehydration raises cortisol and lowers metabolism and causes your body to take glycogen stored in the liver, convert it to glucose, free it up as glucose, convert it to fructose, and store it as fat so that you can use it if you get more dehydrated to burn fat to get water. So you do not want to become your own fat storing machine by being dehydrated. So that's a big one. The other one is alcohol. Of course, we know creates more visceral adipose tissue, especially sugary drinks and beer. And then the other one are ultra processed foods. Not only do they have a lower thermic effect, but they tend to have more fructose and damaged seed oils. And that fructose specifically, damaged seed oils potentially have some insulin resistance problems, and then fructose and carbs can cause more visceral adipose tissue. So those are some of the big things. The other thing that can be helpful here is cold exposure, because it will actually beige the white fat in your visceral adipose tissue and help you burn it off.
That's great information. I think it's important for people to really pay attention to this, because at the end of the day, like when we're talking about losing body fat, obviously a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, this has definitely always been a goal of mine, is to do it for vanity reasons, to look good, in the mirror.
What's wrong with wanting to
Right.
look good? Like, where did
Exactly.
that get to be a bad
I
thing?
know,
Come
right?
on.
But then it's on top of that, it's really beneficial because of your overall health and making sure that you're doing what you can to protect like your insides, right? And I know a big part of it is nutrition. We spent a good bit of the conversation talking about different forms of exercise and how to optimize those things to achieve the goals we're talking about. And at the beginning, you touched on making sure you're eating enough protein while also controlling calories and making sure that you're weighing your food and paying attention to that. Within the frame of that, like, what are some of your like favorite foods to eat that will help move the needle further along when it comes to somebody who wants to lose 20 pounds of fat and build muscle?
I think the most important thing is finding things that you love that you will stick with, right? So I actually just recorded a YouTube video about what I eat in a week, and I eat about 9 to 10 different protein sources. So if I rotate off and on dairy, I used to not be able to eat any dairy or eggs at all. Now I can rotate them in, which is super exciting. So Greek style yogurt is fantastic. And I also use my bone broth protein powder. And so I'll either do a bone broth protein powder shake, and I'll do kind of bone broth and pea. I mix my plant and paleo together, or I'll do the yogurt and mix in some collagen, or I'll do 2 eggs and 4 egg whites. So there's some easy breakfast ones, and I'll use some feta cheese on that. Then we make a ton of protein at dinner so that we have it left over for lunch. Or if we don't have any leftover, like today we did grass-fed beef. I do very lean. I do 93% lean, grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef. But we kind of stick with New York steaks, grass-fed ground beef, New York steak tips, lamb, pastured pork and chicken thighs, and then sea bass and scallops and salmon. And that's kind of like we rotate around with that stuff. And then my diet is basically those proteins, berries, blackberries and blueberries, and then a lot of non-starchy vegetables. And I rotate between cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, mushrooms, onions, broccoli. It's pretty much it. Like, I do a lot of that stuff just rotated in. In my perfect world, I'd eat more beets and artichokes. Those are 2 I love, but I tend to do those when I'm out because I don't like to mess with them at home. And then I have some dark chocolate, then I'll have some dry farm wine. Then I do a lot of, my drinks are green tea with creatine and electrolytes, my Chiatine Electro Replenish and amino acid power or amino power powder in it, and a lot of black coffee, and that's it.
That's awesome. People will often, especially like in the quote unquote biohacking community, you see people that are promoting ketogenic diets, carnivore based diets, low carb. I think people over the years have kind of adopted this mindset that in order to like get super lean, you have to cut out carbs. What are your thoughts on that?
The research doesn't show that. I think that you can modify carbs and fat. Like, your protein needs to stay the same. And if anything, if you're trying to recomp, drop fat, put on muscle, push it up a little bit. Like, I do 1.5 grams per pound of target body weight. I find that works really well for me. If I don't eat enough carbs, I find that my exercise suffers. So, but I tend to get the majority of my carbs from non-starchy vegetables and, a couple cups of berries. But I think we should get at least 100 grams of carbs and 60 grams of fat, and then you can play with it from there and see where you want to go. A keto diet for me, if you had cancer, I'd send you over to Dr. Boz and I'd have you do a ketogenic diet. But for ketogenic for weight loss, I think people are misguided there, because what I see with that is it can help you with appetite, but quite often I see people adapt to it and all of a sudden they're eating a lot of fat. This is especially for women, because we just don't have as much of a caloric bank as men do. We're sitting here going, oh, I'm burning fat. Well, you're burning dietary fat. You're not burning body fat, right? So, if you're shoving a bunch of fat in your coffee in the morning and then you're eating fat throughout the day, you can overload your calories so easily. So, I have to monitor my olive oil. If I left to my own devices, extra virgin olive oil and ghee, I will just go overboard with. Carnivore, I find, can be a really great food elimination diet for a short amount of time, especially with someone who's got a lot of food noise. Here's the thing. A diet that heals you probably is the diet for you long term. It's a short term. Like, we have to think of diets differently. They're tools. So maybe you're going low carb for a while to help restore insulin sensitivity and stabilize blood sugar. Or maybe you're doing carnivore because you got a lot of food noise and you need to restrict. Or maybe you're doing intermittent fasting, which intermittent fasting does have some benefits beyond caloric restriction for visceral adipose tissue. But maybe you're doing that because it helps you with caloric restriction because you're just dropping out a meal. It's like, these things are fine. Just know what you're doing it for. I find people jump on a diet. They have no idea what the benefits of the diet are. Their manicurist was on it. And so they went on it. And I'm like, no.
You pointed out something that's really important for people to hear. Like, burning dietary fat is not the same as burning body fat, right? Like, and it's just like how it's just a different fuel source that your body uses. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're actually going to burn.
We get so weird about the whole thing. Like, our bodies are hybrids. We want to be fat burning. We want to be sugar burning. There's never a time we're solely burning fat or solely burning sugar, unless you're doing like 10, 20 seconds of an all out hyper 110% super maximal exercise. Like, I was super excited. I was wearing a CGM at the gym and I got my blood sugar up to 230. And I thought, my buddies at the blood sugar company, I thought they're going to call me going, what the hell is going on here? But I was doing really, really hard exercise. So, that's when you're going to use more carbs for fuel. And so you got to look at what you're doing. Your body should be able to use carbs. It should be able to use fat. It should be able to use the best fuel for whatever it's doing. When you're sitting, it's going to use more fat. If you're doing high intensity exercise, it's going to be using more carbs. Great. It's fine. And if you go into a deficit, it's going to have to get it from somewhere, and it's going to go to your fat stores first. Right.
I mean, that's another important point that you pointed out, is like, people who are like afraid of their blood sugar spiking. They're like, oh, what else like spikes your blood sugar is exercise. Especially
it's this blood sugar spiking thing. Like, it's gotten out of hand.
And you're somebody that has been in the. I mean, I don't want to say biohacking space, because I don't want to pinpoint you into a niche that.
Yeah, I'm actually not a bio. No.
But I know a lot of your friends like are in the space. You speak at a lot of the same conferences, and so that's been something that has been like a main topic of interest for them, is the whole like blood sugar argument. So it's really, I guess, cool and interesting to hear you, and not just debunk it, but come out and really like passionately say it's BS.
Well, there's some interesting things to learn from it, like this. It will teach you that if you eat late at night, you are screwed the next morning, because you'll have a higher, like, what's really important? Couple things. Number one, your fasting blood sugar. Where is it sitting? If it's sitting higher, problematic, right? The other thing that's important is not the spike after the meal, but the extension after the meal. So if I eat a bunch of kiwi and my blood sugar goes up and down, hey, cool. But if I eat like something and my blood sugar stays elevated for 4 hours, problem, right? So we got to know what we're looking at and what's going on, and how much. It's really that time under the curve that we're looking at, and where our fasting is. So it's just, we've kind of gotten to this weird thing of like watching everything going, does that spike my blood sugar? Well, if you eat, like I ate some kiwi and my blood sugar went up and then it went back down. That's what it does.
Yeah. And you mentioned like adherence, and that, the best thing for people to follow is one that they can stick to. And like, Stan Efferding also says like compliance is the science. Like, the best diet is the one that you'll stick to. I mean, you can set out to do this extreme diet that you saw on TV or you saw from your favorite influencer on the internet. And if you can't stick to it, it doesn't matter, right? You have to find whatever works for you. I think, the person that will walk consistently for months and months and months will be, I think, healthier than the person who just goes to the gym and lifts weights hard like once every other month, right? So I think it's like consistency with whatever you're doing is going to, trump anything else. But at the same time, like, if you're trying to really crush your health and fitness goals, you have to take it seriously, and you have to like really track what you're doing and implement, some of the things that we've been discussing.
Right. With tracking, I love that you just said that, because if you're not tracking, how do you know? You can't think that your visual representation will be anything, because we're really bad at that. We are our own worst critic.
What do you think the biggest mistakes are
that people make when it comes to losing body fat?
Well, I'm glad you said losing body fat. So you already like fixed the biggest mistake is people trying to lose weight.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the big one. And it just blows my mind. I had to go to the doctor recently and I go in and they put me on a scale and I go, how is it in 2023 that I am still standing on a scale and you are going to use this for what information? Like what information did you just get there? Nothing. Right? And so the very first thing, big mistake we're making, I mean, you wouldn't go on our computer, say, I want to fly to New York this weekend and not have a starting point. You wouldn't do it. But yet that's what we do here is we go, okay, I want to lose body fat. Then I'm going to look at my weight. Well, how do you know if you lost body fat if you're looking at your weight? What if you did a big caloric restriction with very low protein and didn't, sat on the couch? You could lose a lot of weight. You could become worse, not better, because you didn't lose body fat, you lost lean tissue. So I'd say the thing that we're really doing is we're looking at the wrong metrics, and women especially. And I got to tell you, I've been talking a lot about creatine lately, and women have been like, oh, but I'm going to gain weight with that. I go, if you are lucky enough to gain weight with creatine, it means that you have more water in your muscles. This is what we want. If you are one of the few women, because it rarely happens, that actually manages to do that, this is what we want to celebrate. But we are so used to trying to weigh less, be thinner. I had a gal come to me when I owned my gym in Palm Desert, and she wanted to lose 10 pounds. And I looked at her and, her body weight was completely normal for her weight. She looked fine. She looked fine in clothes. But once you saw her in a swimsuit, she was just, skinny fat. And when I did her body fat, she was like 25, 26%. And by the way, I'll tell you, back when I was in doctoral school, the norms they gave us for body fat back in the 80s are totally different than what they say the norms are now, because now, you're healthy at any size, which I call BS on. So our norms back then for a woman was 18 to 22%, 25% at the highest. Athletic women were in the 15 to 22% range. So this one was 25, 26%. We worked together a year. She goes to 19% body fat. She dropped 10 pounds of fat. She puts on 10 pounds of muscle, and she drops 2 clothing sizes. She looks amazing, and she is disappointed because she didn't lose any weight.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, that people get upset when they don't lose weight, but they've lost body fat and gain muscle, because we've put so much emphasis on the scale, like you've said, and we really haven't done we've come out with all these great tools, right? In the biohacking space, there's so many things where you could essentially track like every metric of your health that you wanted to, for the most part, but we haven't come up with anything, more modern that's accurate, that test body fat percentage that people can do from the comfort of their home. I mean, unless I know there's DEXA scans, you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, I have a DEXA scan at home. I do it every day. No, okay. So yeah, it is a big challenge. And then now they're saying, well, the DEXA is not really accurate. Get an MRI. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you have to say good is good enough. So what I did was, I had people do a DEXA, then go home, use a bioimpedance machine. No, they're not going to be accurate like the DEXA. However, we're going to look at the trends. I know that a DEXA reads me, the bioimpedance machine I have at home reads me 9% higher than the DEXA. And so I know that. I'm just watching the trend. I'm making sure that I am not dropping skeletal muscle. I'm not, all of a sudden my total body water isn't dropping, right? So you watch the trend. And that's what you can use a bioimpedance machine for, not for the absolute, but for the relative changes to make sure they're going in the right direction. And you're getting great information there. And then every 6 months, go do a DEXA.
And so you talked about this person that gained muscle, lost body fat. And I think that is the goal, I would think, for many people. I mean, unless they're heavily obese and they just need to lose weight just for the sake of like their immediate health, right? And so with that said, we know that one of the biggest mistakes that you've identified is not thinking of it as losing weight. It's more losing body fat and making sure that your body fat percentage goes down in a healthy range. What are some of the things that you would have somebody do if they're looking to minimize muscle loss while also losing body fat.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I worked with an amazing endocrinologist about 20 years ago. It was all the way up to doctoral level classes in exercise physiology. We didn't even have any classes in endocrinology. Like I bought the first exercise endocrinology textbook later on, but working with her, she really helped me understand. And one of the phrases she said, understanding hormonal effects with exercise, with eating, with all of that, was you don't lose weight to get healthy. You have to get healthy to lose weight. And so if you think about that, what are we really trying to do? We're really trying to make sure that our body is metabolically healthy. It can build muscle. It can lose fat. You have to be metabolically healthy to lose fat. And so when I look at this, the first thing, I always feel like, what's the thing that we can attack first? Well, we all eat, right? So, and I like just kind of trading some behavior. So I have a mantra, and that mantra is eat protein first. The reason being is if you eat protein first, and I've been doing this little challenge with my community, it's a 7-day challenge. All they have to do is figure out how much protein they should have. I have them dose between 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. Then I have them get it in minimum 100 grams a day, minimum 30 grams at a meal, 40, 50 better, and especially at your bumper meals. And what I've seen by just doing that their cravings go away. You know that when you eat protein, you're way more satiated. We've got a higher thermic effect of food, like 20 to 30% of those calories just from the protein are going to be used in the digestion assimilation. It's going to help you with getting the essential amino acids so that you can go through muscle protein synthesis. So just that one thing can be this little hinge that swings a big door. So that's the place I always like to start, because what I found in the last 40 years is people need a quick win, right? They need some kind of quick win that helps them start to feel better. But again, I won't do any of this unless someone is willing to do two things. They have to be willing to understand their body composition and track those changes, because again, they may not see. My husband, we went and did DEXAs last year because I decided for my 60th birthday, I wanted to get into the best shape of my life. I did my DEXA at 59. It was exactly the same as my DEXA at 39. It was 154 pounds, 13.9% body fat. My husband, who looks great in clothes, was 25% body fat. And so he dropped in 6 months, he dropped 20 pounds of fat, put on 19 pounds of muscle. What would have happened if we weren't using a body composition scale and going back and looking at the DEXA again, right? So you have to do that. And the other thing, when you're doing that eating protein first, you have to actually weigh your protein and track it. This no like deck of cards, hand, like no, you actually have to track it and know how much you're really getting. Because while people tend to underestimate what they eat, anywhere 25 to 40%, they are nowhere near what they need in their protein. They're overeating on fat and carbs. And that was my husband. He was like Siete chips here and some hummus and nuts and, piling on all that and not getting enough protein in.
Yeah, healthy food's still calories, right? And I think with that said, I've often made that mistake too. Like when, I'm trying to reach some sort of fitness goal or health goal, if I'm trying to drop some body fat or get leaner or whatever, that I don't track my food, because I'm like, all right, well, I know what I'm eating. I've been doing this long enough. I'm eating healthy food. I mean, it must be, I must be doing it the right way. And then I find that, I'm actually eating a little bit more than I need to, and I need to adjust accordingly. You deal with a lot of busy people. I know you're busy yourself. And while that's not necessarily an excuse, it's just the fact of the matter is, people are just busy. And I think sometimes they have a hard time tracking things. Would have been what's been a system that's worked well for you throughout the course of your life, or something that's worked well for this group that you lead or people that you coach that helps them effectively and efficiently track what they're eating?
All of this stuff comes down to a decision, right? Because I had a great nutrition mentor early on who said, if you don't have time, make time. To me, if you say you don't have time to track, like really, I use the Chronometer app. It saves your stuff. You can save your favorite meals, you can save your things and just move them over. So, it's like they say they don't have time, but yet you look at the places people are spending time. So I think that really is much more about deciding you're going to just do this and make the commitment. And I think, you don't have to track for the rest of your life. I say do it for a month, get really clear. And then if things start to slide, I believe that we need to weigh in every single day and do if things are, staying the same on your scale, then you're fine. But if not, do a tape measure around your waist every week to help with the visceral adipose tissue markers. But, you have to do those things. They're just part of what you do every single day. And if your weight starts to shift, go back to tracking again, right? Because it's just like, drinking wine. You drink a glass of wine at home, and all of a sudden your wine glass gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you go to a restaurant and you go, that's what a 4-ounce glass of wine looks like. What was I pouring in my glass? It's the same thing. We just, like, the portions in the United States are just insane. So it really helps you learn and connect the dots because, as you said, too much healthy food is unhealthy.
Outside of protein, what are some of your favorite foods to eat? Like if you were looking to drop some body fat, or if you had a client that wanted to lose some fat around the waistline, like what other types of foods would you say you would make sure that are incorporated into some sort of plan to ensure that they're not only going to stay within their caloric range, but it's actually going to help them reach their goals?
So I always start protein first. And I say eat protein first and build your plate around protein. Next thing I add in are non-starchy vegetables. I am not afraid of vegetables. I do not believe they are the foe. I know there is so much stuff. I'm like, it is amazing, having been in this field for 40 years, seeing the different things that have been vilified. Right? I mean, and now we've got evil plants. I'm like, okay, come on. So I think plants are good. Certain ones need to be cooked, right? But, greens and deep leafy greens and rainbow of vegetables, that's my next thing. All the non-starchies, at least 5 servings a day, a half a cup cooked, cup raw. More is better. So we regularly get like 10 servings of non-starchy vegetables a day. We're big on mushrooms and onions that we put on our grass-fed. We finally found a company that we could get grass-fed bone-in New Yorks. Like we have to ship them in, but yay. And we'll do like tons of mushrooms and onions and then broccoli on the side, add a little ghee. So I do that. I do 2 servings of fruit a day, generally berries. And that's what I might have someone go up to 3, but I basically keep fruit around 2 servings. Then I look at how much fat are you getting in? Because if you're eating animal sources, you're going to get in some fat, which is why it's important to get clean animals, because you are what you eat. So super important to buy quality protein and not eat garbage. And it's one of my big arguments when you see people talking plant-based is they're comparing like their diet to eating junk food, stuff like all the factory cows. You can't compare that to grass-fed, grass-finished, right? So that's the next step, is count in the fat that you might have used on those vegetables, count in the fat in there. And then beyond that, I think you should start with about 100 grams of carbs a day, start with about 60 grams of fat a day, and then see how you feel. Some people do better, like I think beyond 100, you earn your carbs with exercise, but some people do better pushing their carbs up more. Some people do better pushing their fat up more. What you don't want to do is push up your carbs and fat and drop your protein, because that's the obesogenic formula, right?
What are your thoughts on adherence? I mean, I've heard, I've had like Lane Norton on, and he's talked about that. I mean, people can follow like high carb or low carb, and it depends based on like what they're going to actually follow. Like, what role do you think adherence plays in all this?
Adherence is everything. Like if you try to design a diet someone's not going to eat, what's the point? It won't work, or if you design a diet that puts their trigger foods in and they overeat, well, then you've got a problem too. So you've got to design something that is going to work for them and work for their lifestyle, but still follow those basic principles. So, adherence is everything. And again, like you look at all of the different studies and, high carb and high fat with protein constant and calories constant play out the same. So I look at them, I think diets are tools. And I'd lower carbs if I had someone more insulin resistant. I was trying to fix that. I'd lower fat if I have someone who's wanting to really push, has got more adrenal problems, or is really trying to push through more cardio, and I haven't managed to convince them otherwise because That would be the next thing I do, is drop that, right? So I think there's places to play around with this, but I'm much more of a balanced approach to all of that.
When it comes to, losing body fat, and specifically like belly fat, like fat around the waist, I feel like people, their first inclination is, I'm just going to go do planks and crunches. I'm going to do stuff with the medicine ball, which, listen, I think core work is important. However, I know you're very big on resistance training, and that in itself can play a massive role in losing body fat. We talked about this at the beginning, that it's important to gain muscle to be able to lose, body fat. What is your, I guess, why do you believe resistance training is so important? And then, like, how do you see people incorporating it if they're looking to, stay on this theme of losing body fat?
It's so crazy. And it was probably more because we were funded by Precor. When I was in graduate school, my graduate school degree was all focused on biomechanics. And so my work was in spinal lifting biomechanics. So I was the black sheep in the department. Everything was cardio focused. We had all these Precor machines, and we had people come in and do 30-minute aerobic sessions, and that's what everybody was doing their thesis on. And I did mine on strength because early on, like, I was actually paying my way through graduate and doctoral school by personal training. And what I saw quickly was that I wasn't getting results by just having people do loads of cardio, despite what we were being taught in school was that you should not have people lift weights till they lose weight. But I was going down to Gold's Gym in Venice, California, and the body, first of all, they had this one little area back then. It was a huge room and one little area in a loft where they had 5 Schwinn Airdynes. That was the extent of cardio. All of these people who were the most ripped, lean people ever, and women in their 60s and 70s that you would die to look like, weren't doing cardio. They were lifting weights, and then they were going and having chicken, brown rice, and broccoli, right? Like the diet of the bodybuilder. And so if you look at that, you go, okay, the idea out there is if you want to lose body fat, you should do loads of cardio. The reality, especially for that belly fat, and when I think of belly fat, I'm not talking about the inches you pinch. That's the subcutaneous fat. I'm talking about the deep fat, the visceral adipose tissue. When you look at that fat, you do a lot of cardio, you're going to make that worse, not better. You stress your body more, you're going to create more visceral adipose tissue, not less. If you start to look at it, and what I realized way back then, and I didn't have the science behind it yet to understand why, I just knew that this worked and that didn't, was that when I started to do resistance training, and the way I thought about it in my brain was, I'm basically, if they're doing cardio, it's like they're spending the money they have. If they're doing resistance training, it's like they've invested it and they can spend the interest. So I'm going to have them do the resistance training, which is going to hold everything in tighter, I could clearly see it, and improve their metabolism. I mean, not dramatically, but muscle obviously has a better metabolic effect than fat, plus it improves insulin sensitivity. So that was always the focus. Then I started to get really interested, and this was when I was on Dr. Phil. I was really interested in why some people struggled with losing weight, despite the fact that it seemed like they were eating healthy and exercising. Now, I couldn't put them in a lab and really make sure they were eating healthy and exercising, because the first thing you'd go is, were they really? But I wanted to look at anything that couldn't get in the way of you losing weight or cause you to gain weight or really shift your body composition. And what was clear as I started to dig into that was the role of stress, the role of sleep, the role of things like alcohol, because it's going to be metabolized first and cause, I mean, there's a reason they call it a beer belly. Like, what are those things that can cause problems? So when I think of visceral adipose tissue, I think you got to handle stress, you got to handle sleep. One poor night's sleep, you're more insulin resistant. You're stressed out, you're going to break down muscle. You've got all those cortisol receptors in your belly. You're going to lay down fat. You're going to crave sugar. You're going to get more possibility of leaky gut. You have more food intolerance. You get more inflamed. And you've got to move off of the cardio and into the resistance training and shift the cardio into high intensity interval training. And when you look at it, like, as we age, we're not losing the endurance muscles. We're not losing our slow twitch muscles. We're losing the HIIT training muscles, the resistance training muscles, the fast twitchers. That's where we really need to focus.
If somebody's listening to this or watching this and they want to get a head start and lose 20 pounds or so as fast as possible, how can they do it in a way that's safe and effective?
First of all, when you say 20 pounds, I'm assuming they want to lose 20 pounds of fat.
Correct.
Okay, because that's a very important clarifying question. Because I could really, like, if you want to lose 20 pounds fast, what you should do is fast and sit on the couch. But you're just going to be a flabbier version of yourself. That would be terrible. So what we want to make sure of is that you're losing fat. And so in order to do that, really, when you look at it, to preserve lean muscle, you really shouldn't be losing more than 1% of your body weight a week. So my biggest thing when you're losing fat is to make sure we're holding on to, or better yet, building lean muscle, which means you need to make sure you're getting in your 1 gram per pound of target body weight of protein. And I would augment that with essential amino acids, just as an insurance policy, especially in the morning, but morning and evening, even better. So that would be the first thing. The next thing I would do is track my calories for a couple weeks. And I would make sure I'd really get clear on how many calories I'm actually eating in a day, because we know that even dietitians underestimate what they eat by 20 to 40%. So if a dietitian whose whole business is knowing this stuff is not getting it right, I think that the consumer doesn't have a whole lot of a chance. So you got to do that using a food scale. I can't believe, Doug, how much the labels dupe us. Like, I was doing something with, like, I don't even remember what, some kind of powder or something. And turns out when I actually weighed on the food scale, it was off. It was off by like 30, 40 calories, which, you know, I mean, if you were trying to really nail this, matters, right? So you got to use a food scale. You do that for a couple of weeks. You find out how many calories average you eat a day. And then 5 days of the week, you drop that by 25%. And 2 days, eat normally. Don't go off the rails. Don't cheat. There is no cheating. And, you know, I was just listening to a Huberman Lab podcast, and he was talking about dopamine. And I used to, because in the Virgin diet, it's drop 7 foods, lose 7 pounds. You can't eat those foods that you could be intolerant to because they'll trigger an immune response and cause a problem. So it used to be like, you know, there's no cheating. And then once you got through that, well, you could do the 3-bite rules, have a little bit of something. But when I was listening to the Huberman Lab, it's like really clear when you have a trigger food, a little bit of it just means you want a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it keeps triggering that dopamine response. So just get the enemy out of the house, find out how much you really should be having, caloric restrict 5 days a week, go to normal 2 days a week. So that's the first two things, the protein. And if anything, kick your protein up a little higher because you won't be hungry, man. It's the easiest thing there is out there. It's like, sit down. I was just telling you offline my Thanksgiving dinner plans of turkey. Like, you notice all I said was turkey and a picana, and then my son's making pork belly. That's like the one I'm going to be careful with. Like, but you can only eat a little pork belly and then you're done. But you eat protein first, you're just full. No one ever once says, gosh, I sat down and ate pie and I can't eat anymore. No, they can eat as much pie as they can stuff in their pie hole, right? You know? Eat protein first, rotate in some caloric restriction. And then this is the big one. You know, we all focus on exercise. We know the fastest way to change your body composition. The fast way is to change what's at the end of their fork. The long-term way is, of course, with doing resistance training and some HIIT training to burn off visceral adipose tissue. But the most underrated thing that you can do for your metabolism and your body and overall long-term weight loss is to move more. And one of the things I've been obsessed with as I design exercise prescriptions for clients is before I ever tell them, hey, let's do resistance training or let's get into some HIIT, the first thing is, let's see how much you're actually moving each day. Because if you're doing the average, which I don't know if you're aware of this, the average amount of steps per day in the United States is 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day.
That's crazy.
It's pathetic. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And so if someone's moving 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day, them going to the gym 3 days a week for 30 minutes is not going to do it. But if I got them to basically get to minimum 8,000 steps a day, ideally higher every day, that in itself would have a big impact. And then we just take it up from there. Then we can, you know, habit stack on resistance training and HIIT training. But it's that neat. We underestimate the power of that. That can be hundreds of calories a day right there. And if you do more of what's called VILPA, vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, these are also known as exercise snacks. If you do a couple all out hard things throughout the day for 1 to 2 minutes, this can have a significant impact on your blood sugar, on your insulin sensitivity, on your metabolism. In fact, a study just came out that showed that people who did 10 minutes of VILPA a day in 1 to 2 minute increments versus compared to people who didn't had a 40 to 50% reduction in all-cause mortality and death from heart attacks and diabetes and stroke and cancer. Like, that's crazy. 10 minutes.
There's a lot to break down there. I think first, you talked about just people moving more. I don't know if you've connected with Stan Efferding or had him on your podcast.
No. Who is he?
He's like a very well-respected nutrition and exercise expert, competed in things like powerlifting.
I just heard a podcast with him, actually.
He was on Drew's podcast, Drew Pruitt.
That's where I heard him. Yeah.
And he's been on the show probably 3 or 4 or 5 times. And
he's been on more than me. So that's what you're saying.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. He's been on more than you.
I've met my match.
But what I was going to say is, I think what you're getting at is doing traditional cardio can be often overrated because it can be hard to just say, okay, I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to do 40 minutes of cardio. What he proposes is doing 3 10-minute walks, throughout the course of the day. And he's like, that's way more manageable. It's not as daunting when you think about it. And, everybody can kind of fit in these 10-minute pockets of time, throughout the day, whether it's walking a dog, going on a family walk, just going out for a short walk after lunch. What are your thoughts on not that specifically, but how can people, if they're at the 3,000-4,000 a day step mark, how can they effectively add in more movement throughout their day?
So here's what's interesting about that 3 times 10. When I was in graduate school a gazillion years ago, a study came out comparing 30 minutes a day continuous, because back then in the 80s and 90s, if you didn't work out for at least 30 minutes, you weren't supposed to even bother because you had to get your fat burning zone or it wasn't even worth it. Do you remember all that crazy caca?
I do.
Anyway, God did that. We just did so much damage to people with this silly stuff. But this study came out, looked at 3 times 10 versus 30 and found out that the 3 times 10 was more effective. And I remember we were all head scratching back then going, what is it? So I'm right there with him on that. And here's one other thing about this. A lot of times when people go work out hard, do you know what they do the rest of the day?
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, they actually start to do less NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, because they're tired and their body adapts and compensates. It's just like when we eat less calories, if we are not tracking how much we move throughout the day, we'll do less. Your body is really compensatory, right? So here's the first step to moving more, to changing that 3,000 to 4,000 steps up to 8,000 steps. Ready? It's a big secret. Can you guess? Can you guess what it is?
Just doing it. I don't.
What are you, Nike? Okay.
No, so, I was just scheduling it throughout the day.
Here's the simplest answer. Track it. It is crazy. Think about tracking food. Just tracking food, people do better. Just gamifying, just starting to watch. And I'm a little obsessive person with my Oura ring and tracking my steps. I admit it. In fact, just as I said that, I'm like, oh, I want to see how many steps I got. And right now I'm at 10,700 so far for today. And the day's not over yet. That's what I have to say. But, since I started tracking that, my floor, I cannot go less than this. And I haven't now for I don't know, year plus, is 8,000. And literally, I remember we were at a meeting one day where, the meeting, I was in the back standing, I was doing everything to move around, but I was 4,000 steps. There just wasn't, unless I was going to be doing jumping jacks in the back of the meeting, which I could have done as a fitness person. They would have not thought I was a freak. But, we go to dinner and I look at my husband and I go, I have to get my steps in. And we were staying on the 16th floor of the hotel. So I took the stairs up. Do you know how little that counted? It was really disappointing. I think I got 1,000. And so then I get up to the hotel room and I go, I got to go back out because I haven't hit my steps and I promised I would. So that's the thing, is the first thing is just monitor it, because what you monitor and measure, you can improve. And then start to just gamify it. If you're at 3,000, what can you do to get 1,000 more every single day? I found, since I started just monitoring it, any opportunity, like trash cans need to go out. Sure, I'll do it. Where I used to be like, honey, take the trash cans out. Now I'm like, oh, steps up and down the stairs. Like I make points of going up and down the stairs as much as possible. So I think just the mere thing of watching it makes a huge difference. And then you think, can I stand instead of sit? Can I walk instead of stand? Can I pace while I'm on the phone? Because everything counts.
I think in the spirit of making walking, quote unquote, sexier over the years, I do think that
making walking great again. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I do think that other forms of cardio have kind of, I don't want to say been demonized, but kind of forgotten, like interval training, running and stuff like that. And, as much as I'll say, like, I think that for the person that is a novice exerciser or somebody who's struggling to get steps in, like telling them to go like on an elliptical for 30 minutes can be, could be overwhelming for that person, and having them just fit in these smaller pockets of cardio throughout the day is likely more manageable, maintainable. But I still think that running can be really great for you if your body can tolerate it. I still think doing intervals, on a piece of equipment can be incredibly effective for, various aspects of your health. What is your, position on other forms of cardio, and which ones do you believe are most effective for burning fat while retaining muscle?
Okay, so here's my exercise prescription. Step 1, the steps. Not exercise. Walking is not exercise unless you are that out of shape. So for some people, walking could be exercise, but for the majority of people, walking is not exercise. Once you get that steps in, so it's now your habit, couple days a week, put some intensity into it by throwing on a rucking vest. Just that alone, actually, they found improved blood sugar, improved fat. Then the next thing I layer on to that, I actually go to resistance training before HIIT training. That's resistance training really in a way, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing squats, it can be HIIT training, right? So the next thing I do is resistance training, because when you build quality muscle, you improve insulin sensitivity and you improve your basal metabolic rate, how many calories you burn at rest. So the next thing I'm going to start doing is working on building muscle, because it's like watching grass grow. It's so slow. I laugh with women who are like, I don't want to get big. I'm like, putting on muscle is like literally watching grass grow. It's like takes forever. If somewhere along the way you go, I'm getting too big, which has never happened in my 40 years of doing this, then we could just back off. It's that simple. So we get that in. And then the next thing, I love high intensity interval training, but I'll tell you what. So I have a couple of different ways I do high intensity interval training, but I also like to use it for those exercise snacks. Just like we talked about walking. Think about if you habit stacked after every meal, you did 1 to 2 minutes of high intensity functional training. And so maybe you did some air squats, maybe you did some jumping jacks, maybe you did some up downs, maybe you ran up and down the stairs, or you did step ups. Like there's, a variety of body weight exercises you could do that you can do in street clothes, and you're not going to get sweaty, and it's going to have a dramatic impact on your metabolism. So one, I love to connect something after your meals, because 30 air squats, 60 air squats is actually more effective than the 10-minute walk. And then what I love to see is like 2 days a week, 3 days a week, throwing in some high intensity interval training, and very specifically to improve VO2 max at least one of the days. So I love that Norwegian 4x4 protocol. I hate it. However, that's when I throw into the routine 1 day a week, where it's 4 minutes as hard as you can go for 4 minutes, 3 minutes active recovery, and you repeat that 4 times. And the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to get your body to really produce a bunch of lactate, which then goes to your heart and your brain to make more mitochondria. So it's really amazing for that. And then the other days, I do more high intensity functional training, or I do my sprint treadmill, and I do 1 minute hard, 1 minute easy, 1 minute hard, 1 minute easy. And I do 10 of those.
That's intense. That's a lot. But I mean, I'm glad you went into depth about different things people can do, because I do think that, each form of cardio has its place, right?
Yes. And vary it up, man, because here's the challenge with our bodies. My first company in the 80s was called Progressive Exercise, because your body exercise is hard stuff that we do that your body then adapts to and gets stronger. So the exercise should never get easier because you're just upping the intensity of the exercise. It should always be hard. It's just you can do more, right? That's the whole goal of exercise, to be able to do more than what you could do before. That's why walking, unless you're so deconditioned, isn't exercise. It's controlled falling. I look at walking like flossing.
Talk about the benefits of interval training and as it pertains to things like fat loss, because I think that when people are looking to lose body fat, they go to long form cardio because they assume, like, all right, if I'm continuously exercising and moving and breathing in and out at a moderate pace for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, my chances of burning body fat are going to be greater than if I just do a short sprint on a bike for 20 seconds, recover for a minute, short sprint on a bike for 20 seconds, recover for a minute. What is going on, like, from a physiological perspective that allows something like interval training to be just as effective, if not more effective, than steady state cardio?
Yeah, more effective is what I'd say. So if you want to lose body fat, the most important trigger is going to be getting into a deficit, because then your body has to use stored fat for fuel. Trying to do that with exercise is so darn, especially cardio, like doing long form, long slow distance cardio, can be challenging because quite often, let's say you go and I'm going to run for 30 to 40 minutes. Well, quite often you're going to do less afterwards. So you adjust with NEAT. So you're kind of back to baseline, but it also is going to make you hungrier. What's cool about high intensity interval training is it actually has a satiety effect. You go do some really hard interval training, you don't come off of there and go, okay, I need to eat something. You don't. You don't want to eat for a while. So it has kind of an anorexic effect to it, which is super cool. We also know that high intensity interval training improves insulin sensitivity and helps you burn off visceral adipose tissue. You're not going to really get that from a, regular old cardio walk, but you will get that from high intensity interval training. So that's the other reason that I really love it. I like to say I used to say your body's a chemistry lab and we don't need to worry about calories, but that's ridiculous. We need to worry about calories, but we need to worry about where they come from more. Your body's a bank account. It's also a chemistry lab. It's also a history book. So you may have insulin resistance, stored trauma, toxicity. Toxicity can make you insulin resistant. So we've got that to overcome, right? Low muscle mass, that we're correcting. You might have hormonal issues like insulin resistance, high cortisol, low estrogen. That makes it hard to build muscle, makes you store more fat around your waistline, and you might be overeating. We need to correct for all of these things. So again, the diet's the first piece, and it's going to be the biggest lever here that you can pull. And then making sure that you're doing stuff for stress, because high cortisol will mean you're breaking down muscle, you're storing more fat around your belly. Your belly visceral adipose tissue has receptors for cortisol in there. It makes it easier for you to store fat there. Same with insulin. You're going to have higher insulin, more inflammation, more visceral adipose tissue. So if we can work the diet, if we can work the exercise so that it's improving your insulin sensitivity and really thinking of it for that, and then looking at caloric expenditure, because there's both sides of the coin, I look at that really for NEAT. Like, I don't think of resistance training or high intensity interval training as to how many calories I burn. I look at the metabolic cost of that. What's it doing for me, right? It's building muscle. It's causing a big oxygen debt, and it's improving insulin sensitivity and blood sugar. So I'm using those for that to burn off fat, and I'm using NEAT for overall caloric expenditure.
At the beginning, you talked about that most people, when they say they want to lose weight, the goal is to lose body fat. In order to do so, you need to retain and build muscle, right? We just spent, the last several minutes talking about various forms of cardio and how to get more movement in throughout the day to effectively manage your overall health and body composition. When it comes to building muscle, what is your favorite way to do so? What are your favorite exercises? How many days per week? How much time should people spend, etc.?
So the newer you are, the easier this is, right? Now, the cool thing, once you've trained for a long time, is it's very easy to maintain muscle. It's a beast to try to get more on. My goal right now is to pack on as much muscle as possible. I'll be lucky if I can put like 5 pounds on in a year at this point. So a couple things I think of there. Of course, you have to have the protein to assist. Of course, essential amino acids and collagen. I use collagen not because it's helping you build muscle. I use collagen because it's helping with connective tissue. And our limiter when we're lifting quite often is our connective tissue. When you get injured, it's not your muscle tears, it's where your muscle and tendon connect. That generally is the problem, or where your tendon's connecting to the bone. So it's the connective tissue that becomes the limiter. And then also creatine, because creatine helps you work out harder. So that is going to help you build muscle. It's not directly building muscle. You can't take creatine to sit on the couch. It's helping you work out harder so that you can build muscle. So with that, the way that I like to do this is I divided the body into 4, and I focus on these 3 things. So there's upper body pushing, and all of these things I like to do compound movements and that are kind of mimicking activities of daily living. You can build muscle on a machine, you can build it on free weights. I prefer free weights and cables as much as possible because it's going to pull in more of my nervous system and balance and core, because one of the body parts is core, and I don't really do much for core because I'm doing things in a free environment. So I have to pull my core in to use it. So upper body pushing would be things like push-up, which is a huge core workout, dips. I do dips off a dip machine with a 10-pound weight assist. And then overhead presses, which I think are one of the most important exercises for women because of how great it is for axial loading the spine, so it loads the spine and the hips. It's great for bone mineral density. Stand up and do your overhead presses. So those are my 3 favorite pushing exercises. For pulling, I will do pull-ups. My goal is to get 5 sets of 10. I'm about right now, probably 4 sets of 6 to 8. I do it now on an assist machine when I'm at the gym. I have a pull-up bar at home, but at the gym, I'll do it and I have 20 pounds of weight assist on it. So a pull-up or a pull-down, or if you don't have either access to that, when you can't do a pull-up yet, just do a flexed arm hang, like we used to do in high school with the physical fitness test. A bent over row I love because it's very similar to normal life where you are bent over, you've got your core engaged and you're picking the weights up off the floor. I like an upright row. So those tend to be my pulling exercises. For hips and thighs, squats and deadlifts. I do deadlifts. I do Romanian deadlifts so I get my hamstrings more. And then I'll do either a lunge or a kettlebell swing. So it just depends what I feel like, but those are the things I tend to do. Now, for hypertrophy, it was funny. When I was in school, the hypertrophy range was 8 to 15, as if some magic thing happened at 16, right? Now we know that there's this big range of starting around from 6 to 30. I personally work in about the 8 to 10 rep range. Sometimes I'll go and just really work more pure strength, 1 to 5. You can build strength and not build as much muscle. And, I like building muscle. So I tend to be more in the 8 to 10 range, multiple sets. Someone who's just starting out is not comfortable. They can do longer sets. The most important thing is you get to a point where you are starting to, if you feel like you might do break form when you do the next one. I try to get that point just where I'm next one's going to be bad form. You really want to get to that with a couple of your sets. Generally for hypertrophy, it doesn't really matter if you did it all 1 day a week or if you did it in multiple sets throughout the week for building muscle. However, for metabolism, it just makes sense to me. You'd be better off splitting it throughout the week. And for me, I do better going and doing it. A lot of times I'll split my routine. Like today I did legs at the gym. Tomorrow I'll do upper push pull. But a lot of times I will split and then do a HIIT training session too. So some days I'll go in and do all of it and I'll do 6 different exercises. I'll do a squat, a deadlift, a chest press, an overhead press, a pull-up, an upright row, or a cable row. And some days I'll go in and do, 6 exercises, but 3 will be pushing, 3 will be pulling, and then I'll do a HIIT training. So I mix it up, but I work on getting each body part in at least twice a week. And work on getting at least 20 sets, I think is a good place to get after you've gotten through your beginner phase. But, once you start to advance, in order to progress, you got to do something to increase your volume. So you either have to add weight, add reps, add sets, add an exercise, something's got to go, right? Or you're not going to you're not going to continue to progress.
There used to be like a saying, like, I'm just looking to get toned.
God. Yeah. Well, what's muscle tone? What is it? Right. I hear that. So I literally had this said to me the other day. I just want to get toned. I want to have arm muscles like you. I'm like, all right, well, let me tell you what I do to get these muscles, right? Here's what I lift. Here's how I do this, and what is muscle tone anyway? You know what muscle tone is? It's hypertrophy with leanness, right? I mean, that's what it is. You have to build muscle. And muscle really is metabolic Spanx. It's going to hold everything in tighter and boost your metabolism. So the only way someone's not going to look toned as they build muscle is if they are like majorly upping their calories and then really not doing anything else besides lifting a little and sitting a lot.
And I think that people are just scared of, and this, I know this myth has been busted time and time again. You touched on it. They're scared of getting bulky if they lift heavier weights. Like, oh, I don't want to do a deadlift. I don't want to do a bent over row. That's what people do who are power lifters or bodybuilders or whatever. What's been your go-to thing to kind of stop that in its tracks when you have clients or people say that stuff to you?
Yeah, because literally I started taking women to Gold's Gym in Venice in the 80s and as on field trips, because they would be so afraid of getting big. And I go, let me show you some of these. And there's two types of women down at Gold's Gym in Venice. At least there was back then. There were the women on steroids. And literally from behind, you could not tell which sex they were. Plus their voices were low and they had these big shoulders and big lats. And then they had the women who were amazing, who literally, I remember there was a 70-year-old woman that I was like, I would die to look like this woman. She could give any 20-year-old a run for their money. And so I would take them there to see these women who'd lifted weights, who were in their 60s and 70s, who looked absolutely fantastic. And, the interesting thing with lifting weights, and this is what I tell women, first of all, you've got to be using a bioimpedance scale so you can see what that weight's made up of. So you're going to be putting together the data. And, we've been taught for so long to just step on a scale. Well, if looking at weight and not knowing what that weight is made up of is like looking at total cholesterol. It's a completely meaningless. Who cares? I mean, you'll know if it's too high, but you got to know what it's made up of. Same with cholesterol. So first thing, we've got to really know what that weight's made up of. And then we've got to really focus on the metrics that are showing us that we're improving. Total body water going up, body fat going down, getting stronger. And the cool thing is, it takes so long as this is going on and people can see this. They also can see that, wow, I'm lucky if I put on a pound of muscle in a month.
Right.
I had one woman who came to me who wanted to lose 10 pounds and it took us a year. She lost the 10 pounds of fat, but she also put on 10 pounds of muscle. And literally went from 25% body fat to 18%, completely changed the way she looked. And the sad part was with all of this, like I was so proud of myself. And she was so frustrated because you know what? She wanted to lose 10 pounds. I know women have, that's why I'm insistent on using scales, because we have so much weirdness around this. I go, you've got to use a scale as a biometric tool to give you information, to take an average over a week. Is my total body water going up? Because that is the proxy for my fat-free mass is increasing. That's fantastic. Do a waist measurement and a waist to hip once a week too. And so you'll see really what's going on. And this will give you the information. Do I need to adjust my training? Do I need to adjust my diet? Or maybe I'm stressed beyond belief or not getting good sleep and I need to fix those things, right? Or maybe my estrogen just dropped. And contrary to what the influencers are saying out in the world, yes, it does cause weight gain. And yes, it will impact your metabolism.
Is there anything that you go back to for your bare minimums when you're super stressed, or I know that everyone's quote unquote busy, but maybe you're in the midst of a book launch or an event or what have you? I mean, is there anything that you fall back on?
So this is the craziest thing. So I got really fired up for my 60th birthday because I thought, you know what, I want to look at what's possible here. I'm literally lifting heavier than I've ever lifted in my life. And I started lifting weights at 16 in the high school gym because there weren't health clubs back then with the football team, me and the bros. And so lifting is heavier than I've lifted in my life is saying something, because I've always gone out and killed it, right? And so I got all fired up. Like for 60, I went down to 11% body fat, and I was like, this is it. This is going to be the decade of expansion. It's going to be amazing. Right after all this happens, like, I'm all fired up. I've got all these plans. My mom, who's 93, my adopted mom, I have to say that because I don't have these genes. I wish I did, but she's 93, like lived independently, amazing, just goes straight downhill. And I always thought, when she goes, she's going to go out like a light bulb. She went out like kind of dimming. It was not quite what I would have hoped for her. Total my car, find out that I have to have a hysterectomy, might have cancer. They thought I had some type of it, which I was like, I'm not a cancer person. And a hurricane hits and floods our garage. And so I'm looking at all this stuff. And what's crazy about all of that is, like, someone was like, so what'd you do this summer? I'm like, well, all this stuff went on, and I leaned more into meditation. I still did, like, I have my exercise that I will always do. And no matter where I'm traveling, we travel 80% of the time. Like, we were in Korea and Bali this summer. I traveled with the TRX. We look at what we're going to do. We make sure we do something every day, unless we're stuck on a plane for 12 hours. But we exercised, we ate healthy, and I leaned into more meditation, because I knew if anything, with all this crazy, wild stuff that was going to get me through it, that would get me through it. And I looked at that and I go, not stressful, not as stressful. The whole thing was like not really a stressful situation, where you look at that and go, if someone else had described that to me and they go, oh my gosh. And I was like, it really was not really much of a blip on the screen. My mom like made it to 93. I was like, had a celebration of life. I'm like, she won. She was like 93, living independently, and then, kind of dimmed the switch, and like, we had a great celebration of life, and she made it. She lived life on her terms. Great for mom, So I think when you get to the point where you have high stress tolerance and good resilience, it's not so much that you say, I'm not going to do those things anymore. It's really, to me, more like, how do you fit this in when you're doing stuff like traveling and busy? How do you make this stuff a priority? And you make it a priority by making sure you do it first, right? Like scheduling it in where it's non-negotiable.
So is meditation something that you've always, in a way, incorporated, or was it just something that you really dove into because there was these extra levels of stress?
So I've lived in flight or fight my whole life. I didn't really realize it till I stopped living in flight or fight. I've had shortness of breath since my 20s. I went to a doctor in my 20s. I said, I have exercise-induced asthma. He goes, no, you have anxiety. I'm like, no, I don't. I was like, I do not. And so I tried some of these things. I couldn't turn my brain off. I'm like, I don't like it. I'd rather just go to the gym. And then during the pandemic, a bunch of my friends had gone to Joe Dispenza retreats, and now everything is canceled. And we found out that there was going to be a Joe Dispenza retreat in Orlando. I live in Tampa. I'm like, let's go. We got a whole bunch of us to go. And so I listened to his books, and I loved what he talked about, because again, it's all the stuff I believe in that thoughts create. And it's a meditation retreat, and you're supposed to do this homework, but I'm like, well, I won't do the meditation homework because I'm going to a meditation retreat. Like, I'll do it there, right? And the only thing I'd ever done is Dave's 40 years of Zen, Dave Asprey's 40, because Dave's like, it's like 40 years of meditation in a week. I'm like, perfect. I can get done with it. And I remember at the time just getting really frustrated with it because I didn't have any tools. Like, now I need to go back and do it because I'll kill it. But I go to this first meditation retreat, and all my friends around me are having these amazing experiences. And I am having like a war zone in my head, because it turns out there's 35 hours of meditation. And so I come out of that week and I go, if a client came to me and said, I'm going to go to a spa for a week and get all my workouts in for the whole next year in a week, I'd go, no. You do it as a jump start, and then you go get consistent. And I went, this is taking my nervous system to the gym. I just learned some tools. I think the frustrating thing with meditation is you can't tell if you're doing it right. Like you can see with the gym, I'm like, oh, I was pumping 30-pound dumbbells, now it's 35. Here you're like, I don't know. So I signed up for a June retreat. Now these are week-long, all immersive, go in June. And what I'm starting to notice is that I'm actually being able to figure out things, get things done, be more efficient. I go back in September and things are starting to shift. I go back in January, and by that time, my team's like, we want you to keep going. We notice a total difference. But what I noticed by September was my chronic shortness of breath was gone. Gone. And I mean, we're talking 20, 35 years of chronic shortness of breath is just, I don't have it anymore. And I tried everything. Like I know that if I need to figure something out or solve it, I can just solve it in the quantum. And so it's just become a thing. It's the thing that we do every day. We wake up, we meditate. And I would say we hit it about 90% of the time. There are a couple of days we miss. I don't beat myself up. It's just like exercise. I say go for it every day because you're going to miss days, right? Diet, once you're where you want to be, go for an A, get an A minus. You don't have to be perfect. That's the all or nothing behavior, and that's when you end up with nothing. But the shift that's made for me, and it was interesting. I was having dinner with Dr. Joe. We actually brought Dr. Joe to Mindshare last year, and we gave him the Pinnacle Award. And because I really wanted healthcare practitioners to understand that if they put this into their practice, along with what they were doing, the modalities they were doing, and patients could already see themselves healed. They could see themselves where they wanted to be. Like when you look at how I was successful with Grant, is we were all so clear about where we saw Grant. And Grant saw that and took it on too, where we just saw him, limitless. This is where he was going to be, 110%. I did a lot of the work that Dr. Joe talks about because that was how I was trained by my mentor, just to think that way. But now I have real tools with this. And you look at this and go, I was sitting with Joe at dinner and I said, I've lost 5 pounds since I started meditating, not of muscle, of fat, because my nervous system finally got out of flight or fight. I finally calmed down. And, I think because I'm an adopted kid, and there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on when you're, adopted at birth, that this finally got me kind of settled into like, whew, right? So, whether it's Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, who I love, or maybe Emily Fletcher, Ziva Meditation, or Nick Ortner tapping. There's like so many great solutions out there. Breath work. If like Grant, my son, is a big breath work guy. He's like a Wim Hof aficionado. He whims. So it's like, whatever it is, you find that thing that works really well for you. And, you take your nervous system to the gym, just like you take your muscles to the gym, right?
You talked about how the meditation has become like a regular practice for you. And I think there's a lot to be said for how you start and end your day. Like, I think if you get up and, you eat like cereal and you just drink no water and you go about your day, and then that becomes like a habit, and then you start to stack other bad habits and it sets you up for failure for the rest of the day, I think. And then the other thing I think is true is that at night, if you're just drinking tons of alcohol, if you're drinking loads of caffeine at night, if you're staring at your screen up until the time you go to bed, it's going to mess up your sleep. And now you're like trying to play catch up the next day. So in your opinion, in your experience, what do you think is the best way for somebody to start their day if they're looking to optimize their health and stay on track with their fat loss journey?
Well, first of all, it starts with getting a really good quality night's sleep and not stealing from sleep to start some crazy morning routine. So I remember when I was on Dr. Phil, he had some gal come on and she started talking about getting up at 4 a.m. She was going to bed at 10 so that she get a double workout in. And I'm thinking, and he was celebrating that. And I think, this is not good. So you got to have that quality sleep the night before. That's the first important thing. I am a huge fan of starting the day with meditation. Like, starting the day with meditation and then immediately going and seeing the sunlight and having really great coffee. Big coffee fan. Now, for me, I played around with all sorts of stuff. I used to journal every morning, read books every morning. But what I found that I've settled on now after moving into the meditation thing is morning is my money time for my brain. And that's where I really do my best program development, might be reading the latest research. So that's kind of my sacred time for that I do now. So that seems to be working really well. I played around with some other things, but I find starting the day with meditation, and some days, today we did a 30-minute, some days it might be a 15-minute, whatever it is, we get something in, it just changes everything.
I'm curious, really quickly. I know you've been dialed into your health for some time. You've had a lot of success in your career as a parent, helped save Grant's life, great mom, all the things. Was there a moment where you realized, like, man, like, I need to fix this fight or flight thing? Like, I gotta dive into something so that I can take my life to the next level?
It was a not so blind spot. Like, I knew it was there. I remember I was teaching, I had brought a workshop in for healthcare practitioners on adrenal salivary index testing. And the lab director was like, you have to take the test. I'm like, I'm not taking the test. And took the test. And of course, I had total adrenal exhaustion. I fixed my adrenals, worked with an adrenal specialist, and then I went and did it again, trashed them again. And this went on for years where I would get them all fixed, trash them again, get them all fixed. And I was like, fine. And so I'd say it was just a thing that I don't know why I avoided it for so long, but I did. Like, it was the thing that I ignored. And I look back now and I think, gosh, had I had this tool in place during my 30s, when the kids were 30s and 40s, when I was going through a really contentious divorce. Thankfully, now we're really great friends, and, some crazy financial problems, and a son getting diagnosed with bipolar. Like, just had I had that tool, like, it would have been so much better. So I was like, I don't know why I decided to just ignore for so long. It's just I didn't want to address it. And I think, we all tend to do that in some area, and usually it's the most blaring one that we need to address. And you fix the biggest one, a whole lot of other things become much easier. So I just look at this and go, I made things so much harder for myself for so long. It's just a shame. So if you are listening to this is a public service announcement, because I think it's one of those ones where, it's kind of a badge of honor to be stressed. It's like, it's not. You are so much more effective. I get so much more stuff done and accomplished in less time by taking that time and just, going into the quantum's the best way to put it.